Heartland? Well, for the heartland, the opposite is happening under Biden's watch. As rural Americans are suffering, they're also finding themselves more alienated than ever before. Politico is reporting that national airlines are now rapidly pulling out of rural airports, the most since the onset of the pandemic, and they don't plan on returning. It's fostering a sense of isolation that's frustrated small-town Americans fed up with big business in Washington. So what and who are responsible for this? Can this be traced back to the administration itself? The piece doesn't really say, but it's important to recognize the result of this. These moves don't just seem to cut off rural America, but through pain, they seem to be, pushing Americans to move from rural America, maybe closer to urban centers. Here now is Daniel Turner, founder of Power the Future. He just testified in Congress about what seems to be a war against rural America. Daniel, is this just a coincidence with these airlines all pulling out of rural areas?
No, not at all. This administration and D.C. elites in particular have a real disdain for rural America. When you look at Biden's housing policies, for example, the desire to move large housing units into suburban and rural communities to make them a little bit more urbanized. You see even the entire Green New Deal that Secretary Buttigieg pushes all the time. They talk about bike lanes. They talk about EVs or high-speed rail. My sheep farm is a couple hours outside of D.C. They're never going to connect me by high-speed rail to D.C. So the policies they're pushing for are written for the urban community in mind. They want people to move to urban areas very deliberately, so they're making it hard to live in rural America.
Well, I think a lot about places like Norway, where there's been an absolute assault on private ownership of farms. So the food growing capacity of that country has changed because the land has been, seized by the government. Could anything like that ever happen here in the name of an emergency?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that point up, because they're seizing this private farmland all under the public health emergency of climate change. And as we saw with COVID, once you declare something a public health emergency, it seems the power of the government is limitless. And so it is very plausible to seize private land. It's very plausible to seize private property under climate change. Look at what they're doing with the combustion engine. And as you were just talking about with your last two members of Congress guests, right, the desire to get rid of the combustion engine, the desire to seize anything that runs on gas, from farm equipment to lawn equipment. So this is all a very deliberate effort to take over private property for whatever the agenda is, whether it's COVID, whether it's climate change. It's all about giving government power.
And of course, all those cows, the great threat to our environment as well, Daniel. You got to get rid of those as well. Thank you so much. Now, a new battlefront has been opened by Disney in its battle with Ron DeSantis.